What started as a simple film partnership has turned into one of Hollywood's ugliest battles. And now, both Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni are fighting for more than their reputations. It was supposed to be just another creative collaboration, a celebrated actress and a rising director bringing a best-selling novel to life. But somewhere between the red carpets and the press junkets, something shattered. Now, Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni aren't just co-stars in a romantic drama, they're enemies in a real-life courtroom thriller that's pulling the film industry into its orbit. The turning point came with Blake's recent deposition, a quiet, behind-closed-doors moment that somehow exploded into a public spectacle. Within hours, Justin's team filed the entire 292-page transcript in court, a move that Blake's lawyers called nothing short of a public ambush. They accused him of weaponizing her own words, of turning a legal proceeding into a PR campaign designed to humiliate her. But the deeper you look, the stranger it gets. Both sides have been trading accusations, leaks, manipulation, intimidation. Every new filing feels like another grenade tossed across the legal battlefield. This isn't just a lawsuit anymore. It's a power struggle playing out under the brightest lights in Hollywood, and every move seems designed for the cameras. Behind the headlines, rumors are spiraling. Some say Blake is trying to silence the voices that don't side with her, even sending subpoenas to content creators who dared to question her version of events. Others claim Justin is the one orchestrating a slow, calculated smear campaign to bury her. Somewhere in between those stories lies the truth, but neither side seems to be ready to let it out. And as both camps dig in, one question grows louder with every new leak. Who's telling the truth and who's fighting to rewrite it? The build-up to Blake Lively's deposition felt less like a legal proceeding and more like a prize fight. Lawyers sparred for weeks over where it would take place, each side pretending it was about fairness, but everyone knew it was about control. Blake's team demanded privacy, arguing she should testify from her attorney's office far from the flashbulbs and the mob outside. Justin's lawyers pushed back, insisting that giving her home turf was just another way to tilt the stage in her favor. One of them even mocked her so-called celebrity treatment, accusing her of using fame as a shield. The judge eventually sided with Blake. The deposition would happen at her chosen location, a quiet Manhattan office, guarded, sterile, and sealed off from the public. But just as she settled into what was supposed to be neutral ground, the room turned cold. Because Justin Baldoni showed up. It was the first time they'd been face-to-face since the lawsuit began, and the tension was palpable. Witnesses described it like a scene from a psychological thriller. No cameras, no reporters, just two people who once trusted each other sitting across a polished table, now divided by attorneys and years of resentment. The session stretched for hours. Blake's lawyers claimed Justin's unexpected presence was a tactic, a way to throw her off balance, to make her crack, and maybe it worked. Because within minutes of the questioning starting, leaks began hitting the press. By 10:15 a.m., just 2 minutes after the first question was asked, entertainment blogs were already reporting what Blake was wearing, who was with her, and even how tense her voice sounded. Her team was livid. They accused Justin's camp of funneling live updates to the media, of turning her sworn testimony into an instant headline machine. Justin's lawyer denied everything, brushing it off as coincidence. But the timing was too perfect, the details too specific. Someone in that room wanted the world to see Blake Lively cornered. Then came the twist. Within a day, Justin's team filed the full deposition transcript, all 292 pages of it, into public court records. It was technically legal, but morally questionable. Blake's lawyers called it a deliberate attempt to embarrass her, to make sure every uncomfortable word she said under oath could be weaponized against her online. And yet, the more she tried to seal it, the more people wanted to know what was inside. Rumors spread that hidden in those pages were not just denials and defenses, but emotional confessions. One alleged blind item claimed Blake admitted to having complicated feelings for Justin during filming. Another suggested her husband, Ryan Reynolds, found out, and that revelation became the fuse that blew this entire situation open. Whether those stories are true or not almost doesn't matter anymore. The damage was done. The public wasn't asking about the movie or even the lawsuit. They were asking the one question no PR team can control. What really happened between Blake and Justin? Once the deposition transcript hit the court docket, it was like blood in the water. Gossip blogs pounced, tabloids spun headlines out of fragments, and anonymous tipsters started crawling out of the woodwork. Within hours, the case had slipped out of the courtroom and straight into the hands of the internet, a place far more ruthless than any judge. The first spark came from a blind item. Buried on an entertainment gossip site known for mixing fact with fiction, it teased that Blake's deposition had included a startling admission, feelings she once had for Justin. It didn't name names, but it didn't have to. The fandoms decoded it instantly. Screenshots spread, Reddit threads exploded. Suddenly, the story wasn't about contract disputes or workplace boundaries. It was about betrayal, jealousy, and unspoken attraction. The idea that Blake Lively might have fallen for her co-star while still married to Ryan Reynolds turned a private legal battle into a public obsession. But here's where the narrative twisted again. Insiders claimed Ryan had discovered late-night calls and messages between Blake and Justin during the filming of It Ends With Us. Confrontations followed. Allegedly, it was that confrontation, not the film itself, that fractured everything. And then came the theory that turned everything upside down, that Blake's lawsuit wasn't just about justice, but damage control. A desperate attempt to reclaim the narrative before her marriage cracked under public scrutiny. Of course, none of this has been proven. Every source seemed to contradict the next, yet the more Blake's team fought to keep the transcript sealed, the more people became convinced there was something worth hiding. Meanwhile, Justin's camp sat back and watched the chaos unfold. They didn't need to say a word. Each tabloid headline painted Blake as unstable, vindictive, manipulative, and every denial only fueled the fire. Then came the Daily Mail leaks, photos of Blake arriving for her deposition, flanked by bodyguards and her half-sister, her expression unreadable. The stories made sure to contrast her entourage with Justin's simple appearance. Him walking in quietly, just one lawyer by his side. It was theater disguised as reporting, and everyone played their part. To the casual observer, it started to feel scripted, like two Hollywood veterans had turned their real lives into a performance, each trying to control the narrative of their own downfall. And as rumors deepened, one question began to haunt every headline. Was this still about justice or just revenge in designer clothing? But that was only half the story, because while the world was dissecting every emotional crack in Blake's testimony, she was allegedly planning a counterattack, one aimed not at Justin, but at the voices echoing his side of the story. And that's where things took a darker turn. If the legal battle was messy before, this was where it turned radioactive. After weeks of leaks and speculation, a new story hit the headlines, and this time it wasn't about lawyers or witnesses. It was about creators, YouTubers, commentators, everyday people who had been talking about the Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni case online. Several of them began receiving messages from Google, official notices that their personal data, names, addresses, even bank information were being requested under subpoena. The source? Blake Lively's legal team. On paper, it sounded procedural, a routine evidence-gathering effort. But to the people targeted, it felt like intimidation, a way to make examples out of anyone who dared to speak against her. Cassidy O'Connell, one of the creators who received the notice, didn't stay silent. She wrote a letter to the judge, publicly questioning what legal basis Blake's team had to demand such invasive information. Her message went viral overnight. She asked, was there any proof, any evidence, or can she just subpoena anyone who isn't on her side? Suddenly, the story wasn't about actors or directors anymore. It was about freedom, who gets to tell the story, and who's powerful enough to erase it. Other creators started coming forward. Influencers, small YouTubers, even podcast hosts who had only briefly mentioned the case claimed they'd been swept up in the same net. Some were big names: Candace Owens, Perez Hilton, Andy Signore. Others had fewer than 500 followers. Signore, who runs Popcorn Planet, believed Blake was trying to unmask the anonymous crew members who had spoken to him for an upcoming documentary about the movie's behind-the-scenes chaos. He said she wanted his sources, and she was using the law to get them. He told Daily Mail, "She thinks she can bully and intimidate independent journalists, but I won't let her." Blake's team initially denied everything, claiming the subpoenas were fake. But when Google confirmed they were real and issued notices as part of standard policy, the narrative imploded. It was a public relations disaster. Even those who had supported Blake began to hesitate. The optics were terrible. A powerful actress allegedly using legal muscle to silence small creators. It didn't matter if the subpoenas had legal merit, the perception was already cemented. Within days, the internet flipped. What had once been a story about a woman fighting back against mistreatment turned into whispers about celebrity privilege, censorship, and control. Blake's team pushed back hard. Subpoenas aren't accusations, they said. They're tools for discovery. But to the growing chorus online, that explanation sounded hollow. Because in the new age of digital influence, the court of public opinion moves faster than any federal judge. And by the time Blake's lawyers clarified their intentions, the damage was irreversible. The same social media platforms she was trying to monitor had already branded her as the villain. But while the internet feasted on that narrative, one person was quietly watching from the sidelines: Justin Baldoni. He hadn't said a word in weeks. No interviews, no posts, no rebuttals, just silence. And that silence spoke louder than anything he could have said. As the subpoena story spiraled across the internet, Justin Baldoni said nothing. No interviews, no tweets, no late-night posts defending himself, just silence. But in Hollywood, silence is never neutral. It's a weapon. While Blake Lively's name trended daily, linked to words like subpoena, control, cover-up, Justin's quiet restraint began to look like moral high ground. The man once painted as manipulative was suddenly being framed as composed, patient, and maybe even victimized. It wasn't just optics, it was timing. Every new headline about Blake's legal moves seemed to reinforce a single narrative: that she was losing control. And Justin didn't have to lift a finger to make it happen. His stillness became the contrast to her chaos. Insiders close to the production of It Ends With Us whispered that this wasn't the first time she'd tried to dominate the narrative. According to court filings, Justin's team accused Blake of foot-stomping and celebrity tantrums, phrases that would have sounded petty if they hadn't fit the emerging public image so neatly. And when those words resurfaced online, they hit like a match in dry brush. Within hours, Reddit threads and gossip accounts began connecting dots. Blake allegedly clashing with crew members, rewriting scenes without approval, pushing her brand during promotional interviews. Clips circulated showing her sipping cocktails themed after the movie's characters, a marketing stunt critics called tone-deaf for a film centered around domestic abuse. Each frame was now being reinterpreted as evidence, proof that Blake's Hollywood polish was cracking under pressure. Then came the headlines comparing her to Amber Heard, the inevitable modern shorthand for a celebrity caught in a credibility crisis. It wasn't fair and it wasn't accurate, but fairness was never part of the game. Because in this war, perception was reality. And Justin, he knew it. His team didn't need to feed leaks or fuel outrage. They just let the public do it for them. While Blake was filing motions and chasing bloggers, Justin stayed invisible, giving her frustration more room to echo. To her supporters, his silence felt smug, manipulative in its own right. But to everyone else, it looked like dignity. For the first time since the film's collapse, sympathy began to shift. The internet's tone softened toward Justin and turned sharp toward Blake. Even casual fans began to wonder if she was spiraling or if she was hiding something worse. Behind closed doors, her team scrambled to regain footing. They issued carefully worded statements about ongoing misinformation. They hinted that Justin's camp had orchestrated smear campaigns through back channels, funded by unnamed publicists for hire. But the public didn't buy it. The optics were too far gone. And then, just when it seemed like the chaos had peaked, Blake's last legal strike backfired. A judge quietly dismissed one of her smaller lawsuits, ruling that her claims didn't hold jurisdiction in New York. It was a minor procedural loss, but symbolically, it was devastating. The woman who had once seemed untouchable was suddenly vulnerable, and the internet could smell blood. By the time fall arrived, the narrative had spun completely out of Blake Lively's hands. What started as a private lawsuit had morphed into a cultural referendum on celebrity power, control, and truth. The same media that once adored her, that had celebrated her red carpet grace and quick wit, was now dissecting her every move like forensic evidence. Articles stopped calling her America's style icon and started calling her a cautionary tale. Her attempts to contain the chaos had the opposite effect. Each new filing, each defensive statement felt less like strength and more like panic. She wasn't fighting a legal case anymore, she was fighting the entire internet. And the internet never tires. Creators began uniting against what they called celebrity intimidation. Independent journalists offered to represent smaller YouTubers targeted by the subpoenas. Hashtags like #StandWithCreators started trending, pulling public sympathy even further away from Blake. Katie Polson, a journalist with a large online following, said what many were already thinking. This isn't about evidence anymore, it's about control. When powerful people can silence the smallest voices, we all lose. That one quote echoed everywhere, and by the end of the week, even mainstream outlets were using it. The backlash hit Blake's team hard. Sponsors paused collaborations, brand pages turned comments off. And for someone who had spent years cultivating an image of effortless charm, the silence was deafening. Meanwhile, Justin Baldoni's strategy of restraint continued to pay off. While Blake looked reactive, Justin appeared composed, almost saintly. His camp issued no attacks, no interviews, no public statements. He didn't need to. The story was doing the work for him. Even when questioned about the allegations that he'd leaked details from her deposition, Justin's lawyer responded with a simple line: "We're not interested in playing the media's game." That restraint only deepened the divide. Public perception split cleanly down the middle. To Blake's supporters, she was a woman standing up against a powerful man who had manipulated the press. To her critics, she was a celebrity who had mistaken fear for control, trying to silence everyone who refused to worship her image. And hovering over it all was one uncomfortable truth: neither side seemed innocent anymore. Because for every accusation Blake made, another contradiction surfaced. For every denial from Justin, another whisper suggested he wasn't as calm behind the scenes as he appeared. In a world where truth had become entertainment, the court of public opinion was the only one that mattered. Then came the leak that no one expected: the unsealed portions of Blake's earlier lawsuit against a publicist connected to Justin's team. The judge's dismissal was routine, but the documents revealed something chilling: that both sides had hired their own armies of PR specialists, each tasked with managing the online narrative. It wasn't a legal fight anymore, it was information warfare. And at that point, the audience wasn't watching two people battle in court, they were watching the slow public disintegration of everything both of them had built. What no one realized was that this collapse, this spectacle, was only the beginning. Because somewhere behind the curtain, another storm was forming. The fallout hit Hollywood like a shockwave. For an industry built on image, loyalty, and silence, the Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni scandal became the one thing every publicist feared: a case study in how fast a brand can collapse when the narrative escapes your control. At first, A-listers stayed quiet. Colleagues who once flooded Blake's comment sections with heart emojis suddenly disappeared. Film studios issued neutral statements. Everyone was watching, but no one dared to take a side. Then, one by one, the cracks began to show. A few insiders started whispering that the "It Ends With Us" set had been tense long before the lawsuit. Rumors of creative clashes, icy exchanges, and production delays began circulating again, this time with the added context of the legal war. Suddenly, moments that once looked harmless, like Blake playfully joking about directing scenes herself, were being reinterpreted as power plays. The whispers grew louder when a resurfaced clip from a press junket went viral. In it, Justin politely laughs off a question about who really directed the film, while Blake smiles tightly beside him. The clip wasn't new, but in the aftermath, it looked different, like a hint of a rivalry that had been hiding in plain sight. It wasn't just the tabloids anymore. Major industry trades began analyzing the case as a cautionary tale, how social media had become the new battlefield for reputation, and how even established stars could lose control of their stories in a matter of hours. One entertainment lawyer told Variety, "This isn't about guilt or innocence, it's about optics. When the public decides you're lying, no amount of legal truth can save you." And in this case, both stars were losing that war. Justin's supporters painted him as the quiet professional unjustly accused, but skeptics pointed out that his camp had clearly benefited from the leaks and chaos, even if they hadn't started them. Every headline that made Blake look unstable conveniently reinforced Justin's image as the level-headed victim. Meanwhile, Blake's public persona, once the gold standard of charm and composure, had turned brittle. Each attempt to defend herself read as deflection. Each legal motion felt like desperation. The very traits that once made her adored, her confidence, her control, were now being spun as manipulation and arrogance. And just as the dust seemed to settle, another twist surfaced. Reports that Blake and Ryan Reynolds were quietly retreating from the spotlight, scaling back appearances, and letting their brands go dark online. For the first time in years, the couple famous for their banter had gone silent. The same fans who once adored their playful dynamic began asking whether the lawsuit had left deeper cracks than anyone realized. Inside Hollywood, a new fear began to spread, that this wasn't just about two celebrities feuding, but a shift in the power structure itself. If public opinion could destroy an A-lister's credibility faster than a courtroom verdict, what did that mean for the rest of them? Studios started rewriting crisis playbooks. PR teams drafted digital containment protocols. Influencers who once thrived on gossip began issuing disclaimers about rumor versus fact. And beneath all the strategy, one truth became clear. The Blake and Justin saga had changed the rules forever. But while Hollywood tried to move on, the story wasn't done. Because buried in court schedules and sealed filings was a date that no one could ignore. The upcoming trial set for March 2026. And if everything up to this point had been a storm, what's coming next might just be the reckoning. March 2026, that's the date the entertainment world is quietly bracing for. The moment when speculation gives way to sworn testimony, and the truth, whatever it is, finally steps into the light. For now, the courtroom doors remain closed, but the whispers never stopped. Reporters circle like hawks, waiting for even a fragment of unsealed evidence. Legal analysts predict a trial that could last months, and both sides, Blake Lively's and Justin Baldoni's, are preparing to stake not just their reputations, but their legacies. The irony is almost poetic. A film about surviving trauma has left its creators locked in one. Blake's camp is determined to portray her as a woman pushed to her limit, a target of manipulation, betrayal, and misogyny disguised as criticism. Her lawyers argue that the leaks, the mockery, the blind items, all of it were part of a calculated effort to destroy her credibility before she ever took the stand. But Justin's team has their own narrative. They frame him as the man caught in the crossfire of someone else's unraveling, the calm center of a storm he never created. They say the lawsuit is retaliation, not justice. That Blake's anger was never about misconduct, but about control. Each story feels rehearsed, honed for maximum sympathy. Each statement carefully worded to play well in headlines. And yet, the closer the trial gets, the more people are realizing something darker. Maybe there are no heroes here. Because behind every court filing, every exclusive source, every polished denial, there's something deeply human: fear. Fear of losing power, fear of exposure, fear of being the one history blames. Hollywood thrives on transformation stories, but this one doesn't have a redemption arc, not yet. It has two powerful people standing on opposite ends of a shattered collaboration, both convinced they're the victim, both desperate to prove the other wrong. Meanwhile, the audience they once charmed watches from behind their screens, popcorn in hand, dissecting every move. And that's the cruelest twist of all. Because no matter how this trial ends, whether Blake wins, whether Justin walks away clean, their story has already been written in the court of public opinion. The actress who tried to silence the noise, the director who weaponized the silence. Two careers forever linked by a film that was supposed to unite them. And when those courtroom doors finally open in March 2026, one truth will echo louder than any verdict. In the age of social media, justice isn't decided by juries. It's decided